Well, good morning. How's everybody? Yeah. Anybody know what the white monolith is on the walkover? Did you guys see that? A generator? Yeah. It just said flammable, no smoking. It kind of scared me. I don't smoke. Well, good morning. We've got a great report out today. So I usually lead off with what do we need to learn to make things better at Denver Water? What's the first thing we need to do? Ted, what's the first thing we need to do? No idea? Anybody want to help them out? Yeah, so we need to learn how to see waste, right? That's the first thing. I'm going to give you something new this week. In Denver Water, and this applies universally, who gets to decide what is value? Who decides what value is? Cheryl. The customer. Right. Right. So we can think about what we think is valuable, right? But at the end of the day, it make a huge amount of sense to reach out to our customers and find out what do they consider valuable. And so I think this event in particular did that in spades. In this case, it happens to be engineering. Engineering is a customer for the Water Quality Lab, and they sought to understand what is the customer value. I'll turn it over to Austin.
Yeah, so this is one of 4 events that Water Quality Lab is going to look at. They're going to get to all the divisions at Denver Water to really try to understand what their customer is really looking for out of the lab and out of water quality as a whole. So I will invite the team up, and we'll get started.
My good friend Drake would not let up about everything that we did in the lab. Ooh, are we going to wear lab coats? Sure, Drake. We're going to wear lab coats. And so I thought if I wore the lab coat during today's report out, it would just dazzle him to no end. So, Drake, it's for you, brother. As Austin alluded to, this is one of several events that we are taking over during the course of the year. We want to understand our customers' needs better. We do, on average, about 40,000 pieces of work over the year, and I'll be quite frank with you, I'm not entirely sure who's receiving all of that data. One of our biggest clients is the state for compliance reporting, and so we send reports out to them, and so a lot of that work is there to support state compliance. And then there are the treatment plants, and then there are the engineering groups, and then there are some other groups, but I don't really know exactly everything that we do, who gets that data. And so this impacts capacity, because if we have things scheduled to collect and to analyze, that takes time, that takes resources, and I don't want that data just to live in the database without a customer. And so with the VSA that we did earlier this year, we identified some of our major customers, and engineering was one of them. So this was the first rapid improvement event out of that VSA, and I think we did some fantastic work this week. So, Austin, if you will. Here's our team. Drake got his lab coat. The team was very engaged in this, very, very motivated, and it was just a wonderful event this week. Dare I say we were ahead of schedule many times, and that felt great. It just felt wonderful. I'd like to say thank you to a lot of people. These events reach out and touch a lot of resources to kind of keep things on track and keep things flowing, and so we did a lot of real quick phone calls and got people to kind of drop what they're doing, sort of, and help us out. I'd also like to call out the people that responded to our survey. Some of you may have received that earlier in the week, and I think within 10 minutes we had 23 responses. By the end of the day we had 80-something responses, and it helped us move forward in what we think we wanted to provide to our customer at that point in time. So within a couple hours we had some pretty good clarity. And again, this is restating kind of what I said. I won't read it to you, but we want to identify the customer, and we started with engineering. And again, wonderful event.
Okay, so I'm going to go over the current state here. So, guy in the top middle up there with the beard, that's Craig. On the left there, that would be somebody in engineering. So they're calling Craig, asking for somebody. And then there on the right, so that's somebody else in a different department, maybe a contractor, sending him an email They're both asking for something. So he has a choice whether to send it over to the lab, to his guys, or to send it to a contractor, which would actually cost money. If he sends it to somebody in the lab, they might be too busy and have to send it off to somebody else. And there at the bottom there, that might mess up their schedule. And cost could go up, backlog could go up. And there at the bottom, that was something that Craig drew. It was work plus time equals either more satisfaction or less satisfaction.
So here in our ideal state, we started off with trying to get the lab involved in engineering construction projects earlier on. So we have the 2018 schedule going back and forth with the lab, hoping to open up some communication to get them involved earlier to identify these issues ahead of time, which we think will lead to a schedule that the lab can adhere to. Construction can keep going and be on pace and not have to experience delays. That'll lead to samples being taken and delivered on time, which will lead to results being delivered on time, and we think that will lead to our happy customer we have in the bottom there.
So every successful continuous improvement event does a gap analysis and asks, how can we go from our current state to our target state? And we used a fishbone diagram, a good visual, kind of also known as a cause and effect diagram, to ask the reasons why. What are the causes? Why? What's stopping us? Why are the lab staff spending so much time on data requests? And you keep brainstorming all of the whys, and that's where you kind of get to the hidden treasures of what can you do to get to our target state.
Well, customer service is really important to the lab, and that was real apparent to me over this week, getting to work with them, and I think it rivals Nordstrom's. They really want to be able to talk to their customers and have their customers be able to get a hold of them. And they had some tools, but we wanted to refine them. So one thing the team did was go through and we tried to polish up how you guys as customers could contact the lab. And a lot of people like to do it in a lot of different ways. So we have Skype. You know, we use Skype here, but we set up a group so you could just Skype the lab, the water quality supervisors. It goes to a group. And the reason they wanted it to go to a group, let's say Craig's in a rapid improvement event. That way Rhonda could pick up the slack. And everybody sees it, so you could get that quicker response. Email. We set up a help desk, or a front desk you could call on the phone number. But most importantly, what we came up with, we redid Workfront and how you could talk to the lab. And you could go through that, and that is their preferred method because it goes through their process better and it's handled better. But now when you select up at the top, you'll select water quality, and you get 4 choices. You could either put in a data request, a lab request to the lab, an operations work request, or just a general request. And it's just a simple form. You fill it out. It's self-explanatory. It goes to the right people, and they want to get to your service as fast as possible. So that's the whole point of that. Next slide. And another thing we noticed, on Inflow, water quality didn't have a web page. So we kind of wanted to have one-stop shopping for people to go. You could go right to their web page now. Gives you a little background of what they do. But more importantly, it has all the links and all the tools you would need to do any of this. You could just go one spot and get it. So they have that now.
So one of the capabilities that we developed this week is going to be the ability for customers to do research on their own. So LabNet was initially created for the water treatment plants to query into the LIMS, which is the Laboratory Information Management System database. And one of the keys there is the sample point name. So, for example, PLMAR EFF is tell you that's Marston Plant Effluent. Might not be very intuitive, but you need to know that in order to query into this. LabNet is going to be expanded to special projects, distribution sampling, reservoirs, and watershed-specific applications. EMAP has a functionality on it where if you enable one of the layers, it'll tell you all the sample points. So all these red boxes represent sample points around the city. Currently, it'll tell you this is SP 121. That will be upgraded to give a better description of what that is, maybe like a physical address to tie to that, so the user that's trying to find some data can get there easier. One of the things that we identified was that the sample point ID, especially within the treatment plants, we weren't able to find exactly where those were on a diagram. So the process flow diagram, that's what a PFD is. We went to all the 4 treatment plants and put together, we found existing PFDs, and we added all the sample points that are in the limbs to them. So if you want to try to figure out some data at a treatment plant, you can pull these up and know where the sample points and locations are.
Another item we identified as a concern was the customers don't always know what services are available at the lab. So we've, before picture of the menu of lab services, if you will, has been streamlined from 86 pages down to 7 pages. And in the coming days, it will be formatted as a searchable PDF. So it should be a lot easier to find out if the lab is capable of performing the tests you're seeking. In addition to that, the Jerry form, just enough right information where projects originate. Some of those helpful hints in filling out that form have been adjusted to include water quality, just to get the thought process going earlier if you need water quality services or not. In addition to the Jerry form, the CPPM, the project's procedure manual, has been updated to have water quality included in the kickoff meetings, as well as the project work plan, which will get them notifications of 30% completion and 90% completion. And they have to have a sign off before it proceeds at that point.
So these are some of the metrics that we have from the event, as well as our overall metrics for our VSA. So initially, we'll start with 28% up there for customer satisfaction, the top box score. We hope to actually increase that up to 60%. We should be about halfway there in a month, and we would hope to achieve that within 2 months. So data request time, currently we're spending about 3 hours, a little over 3 hours a week, turning out data requests. Hopefully within the next 30 days, we can chop that down to 2 hours. Then eventually here in the next 2 months, we'd like to get that down to just 1 hour. Analysis tied to customer is one of our VSA metrics. It doesn't really have much to do with the process and the relationship with engineering. Most of that work is project-based, so there already is kind of a tie to whatever data it is that they're requesting because we're doing the samples. This is more of a VSA metric, so we didn't touch too much on that in this event, but we hope to in future events. Capacity per project, right now laboratory capacity, they're spending about 16 hours, I believe, a week actually dealing with projects. We'd hope to get that down to about a quarter of that, so we'll try and chop that in half in the next month and then do it again in the next 60 days. Also, sample turnaround time, currently it's taking about 22 days or so to get sample collected and then get data to a customer. What we'd like to do is cut that in a little less than half, so hopefully we can do that almost immediately with the tools that we've implemented. So, within the next week or so, let's see if we can get it done. We did a lot this week, but we've still got a couple of things to do. Up at the top there, you guys saw the LabNet page that included all of the plant data that Dan pointed out. We're going to do that with all of the other existing data for the distribution system, our watershed, special projects, and reservoir monitoring projects. So you'll have a table like that on a web page where you can go and look up all the data from all the samples that we currently collect. We've also got to finish up that thing in EMAP where it'll show basically natural language instead of the DS or the PLMF that Dan pointed out. We want to have like a physical address tied to that. We don't want people trying to decipher our laboratory language, for lack of a better term. Also, we need to finish up our training and communication plan. That just means reaching out to all the stakeholders, attending some meetings, and letting them know, we made these changes. Here's how you can use the Workfront tools or the website, or here's the number that you can call to get your data requests and things like that done. And then lastly, that comprehensive menu that was shared, we've got to finalize that so it's a searchable PDF so that people can go in and see whatever laboratory analysis that they'd like to have done, they can find it and then request it. A couple of our insights from this week, learned about how the lab interacts with customers. Water quality does a lot of great work. Rapid improvement events are useful resources for employees to solve issues. I can't wait for the next event. A really productive week, and time well spent, processes will be streamlined. And then kind of ending here, I think it's pretty cool that we touched each one of the Denver Water values. If you guys go to the bottom there, you can see vision, respect, integrity, passion, and excellence. All of these were resonated through the insights, especially on the last day there. And as you can see, creating a map to make future work easier, making it easier for everyone to and listening actively, caring about what we do, heart and soul, and the bar is being raised. So it was neat to see all of those. Questions? Tom? Yeah, so what that would be is that's kind of the average turnaround time for any sample, including contract labs. And the majority of the time for contract labs, it's actually going to be spent with we didn't touch on it much here, but we've made some improvements in this event to try and, streamline things like the way we get data from them so it can be automatically input into our database instead of sitting there and copying things from a PDF over into it. So yeah, that is included in there. Joe?
So this is related to pipe disinfection. And is there an email sent out to construction inspectors like this?
So this is actually overall interaction with engineering. The scope of this project focused actually more on laboratory services than it did like the pipe disinfection. But to answer your question, yes. So each group that we deal with, especially when turning around things like coliform samples, there's an automatically generated email. This was a little bit more specific. So like special samples, people requesting things that aren't typical processes that we have in place. So volatile organics, things like that, things that we wouldn't maybe normally do. Or special projects where there's a whole bunch of different kind of samples that maybe an engineer would like to pull for some reason or another. David?
One-off data requests that they need to execute their mission.
Sure.
Sort of model for the lab.
Sometimes we'll get products in on a construction project that might be suspect. So we've maybe spec'd one thing, comes out, we suspect maybe it's not what we anticipated. And on in those one-off kind of occasions, maybe we'll reach out to the lab and say, hey, can you help us? And then they'll kind of go through the menu of services that they can provide and put together a protocol and look at those and examine those materials.
Say a pipe, and we think we suspect that material does not meet the requirements that we specified. So we might reach out to the lab and go, can you go check this batch of pipe and verify that it's the right PPC formula or something like that?
Exactly. Plastics are big. The VOCs, they're volatile organic compounds, and sometimes if the plastics aren't manufactured correctly, those VOCs will show up in our distribution system, and they're not natural to be there, and they're suspected to not be healthy. So we want to verify that our materials are in good shape.
I can use another example. We're running a pilot plant. We're testing new filter media out of Oslo, Norway, to potentially put in our new North Water Treatment Plant. And it was just me not knowing and not having a go-to that we created on this PDF, a list of what analytics that the Water Quality Lab has. But we were noticing particle counts were lower with this new filter media. And we were wondering, is there another technique, some other way we can look at that in greater detail? And it was me talking to Zeke saying, hey, the Water Quality Lab has a flow cam. You should ask them if they can provide some results, which gives resolution on particle sizes and more data. And now I feel like with this list that we have, I could have scrolled through that and found that. So what are people potentially missing that we're capable of doing analysis on? That's where I see a great benefit of this table being created.
Anything else? Cool. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. We have one more.
There's a team member that's not here that I want to plug. Jennifer Gelmini wasn't able to be here today. She is a samurai warrior when it comes to Excel, and she will give you an honest opinion. So reach out to her. She's great. You may continue.
Thank you, sir. So we have one more update on DIA, all the work that a team did probably about 3-4 months ago. Drake is going to give us an update on how all of that is going.
This is why everybody came, right? This presentation? So out at DIA, this was an event, was it 3 months ago? Yeah, it seems like it was a couple days. We've done quite a bit. And we're getting through, go to the next slide. So our team, Tom Grable, Lee Burke, Nick Ciatola, myself, and Sam Piggies were on this team. And the reason for this action, just to refresh everybody's memories, because it's been a while. This started out as one thing, and it kind of morphed into like 10 different things, but it really started out with, you had the corrosion department, or Lee Burke, and you had the T&D crews, had to get together to go out and get corrosion numbers and do the PMs on the vaults. And it caused a lot of scheduling conflicts. You know, Lee would be available, T&D had to go out and leak. And we were finding like 80% of the time we weren't getting the work done just because of schedule conflicts. So it started out with, hey, let's look at this. Let's see how we could solve this problem. And it morphed. Then it really morphed into, we found some safety issues, these lids. We'll go over in a second. Some of them weigh upwards of 1,000 pounds. The aircraft have to drive over them. It was taking the mechanics, they sit in the water nonstop. They're usually full of water. You know, the de-icing material of the planes helps corrode it. And it was taking 4 guys just to lift it. And they were having to put their fingers and toes under that. So we went out and saw this, when myself and Tom saw this for the first time, we were like, no, we can't have this. Our employees need fingers, they need toes, and they need good backs. So we actually put a stop order on. And we had to go out, we had to fix 120 lids. And so here's a little video of what we did. This is a modification that our weld shop did for us to make it so our guys don't have to go through it. Now here, obviously, it's being done with the backhoe. We can do it with the backhoe. Basically, what they did is cut out a big hole and installed a D-ring so we could attach to it. We also do it off the back of our trucks. We could do it with the crane. It's also been tried with a winch. Problem with the winch, it's got to be lined up just perfect. But the crane and this works real well. And no one's in the way. No one gets hurt. It's simple. So that was one of the first successes. Can you go back to 1 slide, 2 slides back? As you see, we had a huge completion plan, you know, because we started out with one thing and it just kept building and building. Also, we were working on, we had to do a lot of PMs. You go back to the other lid. We got some of safety improvements. One of the big things was getting our PMs done. We have never, depending on what record you look, but for the sake of argument, we never got all the PMs that were required out at DIA and Green Valley Ranch done in a year ever. And there's quite a few. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the total number is close to 7,000 that we need to do, but some of them we only have to do every 5 years. So we really came up with a plan. How can we get all these vaults at the airport? There's over 600 of them. We have to PM 400 of them every year. They have to be pumped out. It takes like 45 minutes apiece. We have we got about 1,400 hydrants that need to be serviced every year. And then like I said, we have like 6,700 valves that have to be PM'd once every 5 years. So it breaks down to roughly about 2,300. So we came up with a plan, and it has to be uninterruptible work. Working with the airport and being in the secure environment of the airport takes a lot of coordination. Take one of the concourse, like Concourse A, where the planes come up. Just to coordinate us to get on one of those vaults, it has to be coordinated with operations at the airport. Has to be coordinated with us, obviously. Has to be coordinated with the tower, the airport, the actual airline. It has to be coordinated with the special services, you know, the food trucks and the baggage handlers and any construction that goes out there. And that's never been done before. What was happening before, we would just show up and go, hey, can we get on this gate? Operations go, well, let me try to get you on there. And we'd sit around for 45 minutes and then maybe they'd get us. Then we're like, okay, we're done. We're ready to go to the next, wait. It just didn't work very well. So we went through, we got a plan with that, and we got that done. And it was originally, we'd never done it before. We thought it was going to take 9 weeks. We're actually 2 weeks over right now. But current estimate is on next Tuesday, we will be done. Everything. It'll be the first time it's ever been done. So we're kind of proud of that. Next slide. They wanted me to talk about insights. I think 3 things that came out of this. The first one was the safety improvements, you know, not having to lift those lids. I think that's huge. People not getting hurt. The second one, when we created all these PMs to go do this work for that 9-week period, we're talking about 4,000 actual individual PMs. We created them. It took Maximo behind the scenes probably about 2 to 3 days to create all these PMs. Once we generated them, we dumped them into Mfield. It crashed Mfield. It's never had that many hit it at one time under certain names. It can handle that many, but it can't handle that many assigned to a certain person. Like, you know, we had Nick and Brian Fields. So that was something we learned. We learned the limitation of our programs. So we learned from it. We since made workarounds so we don't have to deal with that next year. And IT was phenomenal at fixing that for us. But it did put us, it set us back a little bit. But so that was another one. And then the last one, and I think Mary Price wanted me to add this. I told her the story, and she thought it was important. But 2 weeks ago, I was out at DIA, and every Thursday they have a construction meeting. And when you're doing work like that, it's more you meet with their planners, and you kind of coordinate everything. And they normally call on Denver Water at the beginning, but they were kind of just smiling. They just kept on calling on different contractors, so I just patiently sat there. And then at the end, they said, all right, Denver Water, where are we at? I said, well, happy to let you know at the close of business today around 4:30, we will be done with all the preventive maintenance tasks that are in the secure area of the airport that need all the coordination. And they were like, you know, thanked them, because it was a mutual effort how we got this together. If we benefited, they benefited. And they gave us a lot of props for that, because they said that's the first time that ever happened. And those guys went on, gave us a lot of props. And this is not me, this is the team. There's a big team that did this. You know, we're talking Nick Ciatola's crew, Jaime, IT, the weld shop. There's so many people involved in this, but it was all coordinated well, and they were really grateful of it. So it's nice to see that we have an external customer like that, just the relationship and the partnership we built. In fact, the contractors gave us a standing ovation. I think they did it partly, too, to kind of send a message to the other contractors on this is how we'd like to see things done. So I think that was the biggest thing, is just how that partnership was done. So that's it. Any questions? Joe. Great question, Joe. Only 2 weeks of it. Because we were able to schedule it. See, what we did is we got with the airport, we said, hey, in the secure area, vaults, we needed to get on 200 of them. And we provided them a list. I had a map, got with the GIS, Josh and everything. We had maps like this, and we had them all plotted out. Melissa Farquhar and Zeke, who did most of that work, they plotted it out. We provided them a map and a spreadsheet, and we worked on it every day. Check it off, this is done. So they knew when we showed up, they would have 12 vaults ready for us, and our guys were able to go from one to another without delay. And so because we had that coordination, normally prior they'd work 4 weeks of graveyard. We only had to work 2 weeks of graveyard to get that done. And certain gates we could only get on at night, especially around the United hangars. So it was only 2 weeks.
Is corrosion and T&D still tied together in a major group?
No, what we're doing now, and good question, because I missed that part. We trained Nick Ciatola to take the readings. Okay, so now it's just a coordinator of that. We've also taken it one step further. It's not complete. We're working on, and the preliminary part's done, to have the wires ran up to the top of the lid so Lee or corrosion could go out and do the readings without T&D or anybody there and not have to open the vault. So we're missing some parts, but that should be done next year. Next time we do the PMs, we'll do it at the same time. Any other questions? It helped. You know, you have eMaps and it's on there, or you could use MDispatch. But, you know, just given the airport, hey, this is exactly where everything is that we need to do. Here's the biggest problem. What we call Vault VLT 2083, they call something else. They call Vault 4 at DIA Concourse A. And our maximum number and theirs not. So by having this, we closed that gap. So they knew what we were talking about, and we now have a spreadsheet that we could search, so we both know what each one's mean, just so we don't have that. It's just really trying to get us on the same language, and people are visual. You give them a visual like that, they know, okay, we still have these left. Any other questions? Great questions. All you, bud.
Thank you all for coming. That is all we have this week.